Welcome back to another edition of the Hart2Heart Podcast. And today we have a returning guest, Kelsi Sheren. She's a veteran. She's an author. She does lots of breath work and coaching. She's been on Jordan Peterson's podcast before, TEDx speaker. Not sure what else I'm leaving out there, but Kelsi, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me, man. Yeah, there's always a few things. I kind of surprise myself with my intros, so no worries. You're good. I'm good with that one.
Yeah, that was okay. I actually forgot the news conference. You're on a news conference recently too, so
yeah,
that was kind of a pretty big deal.
Yeah, I like to speak in Parliament and make sure that the government is held accountable for their lack of care towards veterans.
Well, since I threw that out there, why don't we start there?
Let's start there.
So, what was this conference all about, and what did you have to say?
So I didn't have to say anything. I'm always asked when I get these amazing opportunities given to me just simply because I've had to go through the broken system and I've had to walk through all the way and figure out how to not only get help for myself, but for others in very non-conventional ways. And so this one was for PsyCan, which is the organization that basically is the umbrella for all of the legal pharmaceutical companies that are doing research studies and developing psychedelics for Canada. I hope I said that accurately. But they're this amazing organization that kind of brings everyone together to rally towards the government and to lobby bills and other things to say, hey, psychedelics are a real option, not only for treating PTSD, but treatment-resistant depression and otherwise, and end-of-life therapy. And we don't need to be holding people, we don't need to be holding this away from people. And we need to actually be looking further into this. And this wasn't the first time. Last year, I spoke at the Senate Subcommittee for Emerging Treatments for Veterans and First Responders on psychedelics as well. And I testified for an hour with MPs and was questioned on my experiences with psychedelics. But this one in particular, what gave me the opportunity to make a statement essentially. And I think I definitely made that statement. They gave us 5 minutes each to essentially say the most important parts of our life and why psychedelics had not only changed it, improved it, but allowed us to become the humans that we are now. I did it alongside a friend, Adam Marr, who is also an Apache pilot from America. And he is somebody that I'm very grateful to know. He had the similar experience with psychedelics, and almost every single veteran I know has had a absolutely sweeping positive experience with psychedelics. Obviously, the ones that qualify to use psychedelics because they are not all for everybody.
And so what was the response after this news conference? Like, did anything happen after that sort of like, you can see as like a signal for change?
Well, I mean, last year, so last year after we did the emerging treatments, it was a massive amount of individuals that testified. I was one of the last ones to testify. There was, the gamut ran every doctor to nurse to whomever, researcher. And they did actually release, it's called The Time Is Now. And it was a massive report that said that the government should 100% immediately be putting funding into massive amounts of research around psychedelics. So we had a good ball rolling there last year in May. That research and their conclusion came out, I think it was in September of last year. So we're not super far off of that 1 year. And so we actually went and sat down with a lot of Liberal MPs, which was a fascinating experience for me, considering I never thought I'd be allowed in government, to have to sit down with their aides. I mean, obviously it wasn't the actual individuals. They wouldn't give us that kind of time. It was their aides where we had to plea to and say, look, this is where we need these bills introduced. And what we were asking for wasn't even just access to psychedelics. We were asking for veterans and calling on Veterans Affairs to fund those who have used psychedelic assisted therapy. So not to say sweeping everybody gets drugs, because that's obviously not what we want. But it was Veterans Affairs has denied my claim for psychedelics now 3 times. And the reason that's important is because I'm a part of the Special Access Program of Canada. And if those don't understand what that is, it's essentially access to drugs that have not yet been tested or regulated by the FDA or Health Canada. And so last year I did a clinical trial for the macrodose of synthetic psilocybin through Apex Labs. I did it in November. And I think I was one of the first veterans that got to experience that particular new drug. And it was absolutely fascinating to see how far science has come with it.
So can you just walk us through that experience? Yeah. There's a lot of people who probably are not familiar with it.
So yeah, absolutely. So I'll give you guys the cliff notes. So psilocybin is the mushroom that everyone talks about, the magic mushroom, but they were able to synthesize and break down just the psilocybin portion of it, the psychoactive component that is they made it into a synthetic so that it could be tested and regulated dosage wise. And so I sat with a macro dose, which was 3.5 grams of psilocybin, synthetic psilocybin, and I did it in New Brunswick. I had a healer come in as well because I refused to do medicine in a very clinical setting with Health Canada.
And why was it in New Brunswick? Like, did you get to select that, or what happened?
No,
there?
it was just the easiest spot for the clinical trial to take place. And so I went there, they flew me out there and I did it there. One of the interesting portions of it was how different and similar it was to traditional psilocybin. Whereas traditional psilocybin, the onset's a little longer, as well as the fibrous material can kind of upset your stomach a little different, and the setting is a lot longer. Whereas the synthetic psilocybin was really fascinating to me because it was a powder constituted into a liquid and you just took the shot. The onset was quite fast. But if you understand plant medicine or you've sat with it before, you'll understand a conversation starts with the medicine. Whereas this felt like I walked up to a door and I had to ask for the door to open. So it was a very different experience, but yet it was still hyper connected spiritually. It was still doing its job. I still was going through what people call the trip and having the experience, but it was very short. It was 3 hours. So that to me was very tight. And we recorded the entire session. It was done at a ketamine clinic, which I don't love ketamine. So being in that building was a little dicey for me at all. But the experience itself was incredibly positive. And the one thing I want to preface so that people understand how difficult it was to get this. People only apply for this and can only apply if you are treatment resistant and are end of life. There is no real black and white. It is very difficult to get access through Health Canada for regulated psilocybin. But fortunately, I had an amount of lawyers that is ungodly. So anybody who is dying, I cannot imagine could get access to this very easily. It's very expensive. It's very tiresome. It's excruciating if you are ill to try to have to go back and forth with Health Canada. And lastly, the thing that was most concerning about the process, I think people should be very aware of, is Health Canada's answer to treatment-resistant depression for me after 10 years of medication and psychotherapy, exposure therapy, CBT, EMDR, all the way down to TMS, everything else, you name it, I've done it, was electroshock therapy. So before they wanted to give me access to a plant, they wanted me to go get put under after allowing them to knock me out and then literally fry my brain. Even after they were consciously aware that I had a traumatic brain injury. Their response to that was, that's okay. If she throws an epileptic fit, we can control it. The thing that blew my mind about that is once you kind of have one of those, we don't know if that's going to happen again. Furthermore, I can't sustain head hits. So the fact that they wanted to electrocute my frontal lobe, we don't know how that we don't know what that kills. We don't get to decide what that turns off. It just fries your brain. So the fact that they were more willing, Health Canada was more willing to electrocute me than give me a mushroom kind of blew my mind a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's pretty odd that they would offer that treatment, before, psychedelics and the other treatments that you're talking about. And I do want to, chat with you a little bit more about that. But just regarding the logistics of what happened and how you got to New Brunswick. So you live in Vancouver or you live in BC, correct?
I live in British Columbia. Yes, we'll go with that.
Okay, so you're in BC. So they flew you out to New Brunswick, and then did you get to select the therapist, and were they with you for the whole 3 hours? And did you get to select the dose? Like, what was sort of just got us, I guess, through the logistic process?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was just easier in New Brunswick. One of the members of the company lived there as well, and they had a good set and setting for it. So it made sense to go there. So I flew out there. Then what happened was they had I think she was a psychiatrist that was there who had studied medicine. She had sat with it a few times, but it's different. I'm a traditional, I'll go to the woods, I'll go to the jungle. So for me, it was strange to kind of go through that process.
Did you meet her for the very first time?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So I definitely, not that day, I met her a couple days prior to the actual sitting of the medicine where we did a few sessions. So that's that integration period that's so important I talk about. So we did that, which was great. But it was very non-traditional integration. It was very medical integration. She was absolutely fantastic, held great space. But for me, it's just again, I don't do things this way. So we did that process. Then the day of, I went in and did the medicine. I was not given a choice as to the dosage. I was very much the guinea pig in the protocol of this and the guinea pig in the dosage. So, I knew that going in, I was okay with that. And so we, once we did the medicine, they did a baseline of my vitals, and then they put actually the wearable heart rate monitor and blood pressure cuff on my hand and my wrist. Now, that is something we learned that we don't do, because one of the things that is difficult is when the doctor would come in and out to check, they would bring me in and out of the medicine. So we learned that that's not going to be the best way to do it. And the protocols that Health Canada and them wanted to really do is an eye mask lying down with a psychotherapist in the room. But if you've ever done macro doses of anything, you understand that the facilitator is just as important as the medicine is the space that they're holding. So this is why I also asked for my traditional healer to be brought in, and she was flown in as well. And like I said, I recorded it, and you can see her walking around with a feather doing her thing. And like, it's very, I need that spiritual side of me, or I'm not going to sit with medicine. So we did the protocol. The best that we could, the way that they asked. We followed the rules very strictly. And then towards the end of it, when I felt myself come out, I let them know. And then obviously they gave me the space to kind of to recalibrate. And then we had a couple conversations with the doctor. And then I met with the doctor a couple days following afterwards.
Okay. So what was the follow-up period like?
The follow-up period, I think knowing that I am a psychedelic integration coach was easier for them and less stringent, because they understood that I knew the things that were going to be happening to me, and I knew maybe how to handle them a little differently with the tools that I have in my toolbox. So I met with them a couple times. And then after that, that was about it. I did my own integration protocol, and I made that clear that I would be running my own protocol pre and post, and that included diet and movement and everything else. Whereas Health Canada doesn't look at the reality around plant medicine that includes diet and diet to social media and to news and all of these other things. So I made sure to run my own before and after integration protocol.
Okay. And then just regard to the dose. So for people who don't know, so the equivalent of 3.25 grams, that's a pretty heavy dose. Terrence McKenna would say that 5 grams is what's he calls it now? A heroic dose. And that would be to get you like to the other side, so to speak. So a lot of people often do, 6 grams just to be safe kind of thing. Have you done higher doses before? And what did you think of, like, say, the 3.25 to the higher doses?
Yeah, so I did 3.5. So
3.5. Okay.
No worries. So I sit with medicine. It is something that is a part of my life and my journey. I don't do it, every 6 months. I do it as the medicine calls in terms of macro doses, whether it's ayahuasca or psilocybin, or any of those other plant medicines. So for me, I had sat with macro doses of large psychedelics prior, but they were all very plant-based oriented. And this one was a synthetic of that plant. So that was a very interesting experience. And I really didn't have a reference point. So for me, it was that mindset of going in just very open, very willing, that very let go mentality, do the work before, you'll get the reward during, and then you integrate after. So it was definitely different. And it was very clean. It was very pure feeling, and which was interesting because I do have a sensitive stomach when it comes to mushrooms. So normally I ingest them in a tea if I'm going to do a high dose. And I do it over like a half an hour period of sipping. Whereas I'm not a big fan of like high dose capsules or chocolates or things along those lines, or even just raw mushrooms.
And do you feel that with the integration, or sorry, not with the integration, with the therapist, it's almost better to do it at, we'll call it maybe, still a high dose, but not a heroic dose. Do you feel that that's better because, you're still a little bit with it? Or do you feel that like if you're with a therapist, you could still go to a heroic dose and still get this like similar benefits?
Personally, the 3.5, because it was synthetic, felt way higher. It felt like it was, the purity was different. So it definitely felt like the dosage, I felt more in probably the 5-6 gram range. That being said, it was, medically very measured. So I know it was 3.5. I am not the person who loves a psychologist or psychiatrist in the room with plant medicine. I'm just going to be honest with it. The way Health Canada wants to run the system, it's going to cause a bottleneck and cause the same sort of problems we're seeing with the healthcare system as it is. And the majority, and not this one in particular, this one was very well trained. She was very good at what she did, and she was incredibly empathetic. And she could truly hold the space for somebody using psychedelics, where that's just not always the case with a psychologist or psychiatrist. And that's because they haven't personally experienced the plant or the whatever it is that they're serving, whether it's MDMA, whether it's ketamine or otherwise. So I definitely do have a little bit of a icky feeling the way that Health Canada wants to roll it out. I am more of a traditional use a psychedelic coach who has sat with medicine a decent amount of times to understand, as well as I think it's important to have somebody in the building. I don't know that it's maybe necessary because I didn't communicate at all with this individual during. I'm not that person. I'm very much in the body going through it. Whereas ketamine's a dissociative, and we've kind of, broached on that before. I don't love ketamine. I'm a big believer that yes, the neuroplasticity effects are there, the frontal lobe, you're getting all of the wiring and firing, and that's obviously what's needed. But I can honestly say I've never had a client who has used ketamine one time, where I have had clients who have used psilocybin macro doses one time and never touched it again. Whereas ketamine is an ongoing situation where they do the same neuroplasticity effects. And so I'm always gonna err on using ketamine to knock somebody out, and I'm gonna use psilocybin to go inward and deal with a problem, because inward is where the problem is, not outward. And so I understand people needing somebody to sit with ketamine, because ketamine can be very dark and very heavy and put you in a K-hole. And somebody does need to kind of pull you back a little on that. Whereas psilocybin, I feel like it rides different. The medicine just rides different.
One quick question on the onset, because you said it was a little bit faster. How much faster are we talking versus
half the time?
Half the time.
Yeah.
Okay.
You got the body effects almost like within 15 minutes. I just got tingly and warm and I was like, oh, hi, here we go. Okay. I didn't expect it to be that quick.
And also too, you said that you experienced less nausea with the synthetic
No
version?
nausea. None.
No nausea. That's insane. Yeah. Coming back to what you're saying though, I've, thought about this for years. I've said it on podcasts, even going back 5 to 6 years ago. I understand someone who maybe is, very hesitant of doing psychedelics, who, comes from a background where they're, super conservative with regards to their, approach to medicine, and they want to do it in a medical facility, and, that should be available to them. But
Absolutely.
I also think that, for someone like yourself or other people, they may feel more comfortable doing it in the woods, in, maybe even just a house that has, a bunch of blankets and different kind of spiritual items there, that kind of thing. And I think all of it should be available. So yes. I agree with you. I do think it is going to cause a little bit of a bottleneck. I think that people, again, not everyone, but I think that there's a large group of people out there, and maybe more than even 50%, that would prefer to do it in a setting that you're describing versus, this kind of medical setting. And again, it's not that I don't think that the medical setting shouldn't be there, because there's definitely some people who would prefer that. But I really, truly agree with you on that. We need to have, a couple different approaches to this. But is that something that's even been put on the table to Health Canada? Do you think that they're open to that, or what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, as far as I'm aware, Health Canada is obviously being very strict in the way that they want this run, whether it's clinical trial, whether it's obviously for clinical trial, everything has to be very specific. We understand that. But in terms of a legalization, I mean, we know psilocybin's going to boom. We know that. Everyone is predicting it to be similar to cannabis, and not, maybe not in the recreational sense, but in the medical sense where it's prescribable. The only concern, right, is when you prescribe something at that dose, and if somebody does it at home and they don't have somebody with them, or they didn't, most importantly, they didn't have integration, i.e. they don't know what they're doing. They don't know why they're doing it. And then Health Canada needs to understand that when you use these plant medicines, they change your reality. They don't just, get in the brain and do their thing, because they have amazing neuroplasticity effects. They do have an ability to heal the brain and the frontal lobe. I equate it to, and I'm not a doctor, so I use the best analogies I can. I take it like fresh snow, and it just slaps right down on top of those neurons, and it gives the brain the opportunity to create new neural pathways instead of just in this negative feedback loop that we kind of get stuck in with either treatment-resistant depression, PTS, or others. And so I think that Health Canada, ideally would love, like there are people who have said like, yeah, it makes sense to be doing it the way you're doing it. That being said, you're not a doctor. And I said, yeah, I know a lot more. Sometimes we just do. So when doctors say to you things like, don't confuse Google with my degree, I go, don't confuse my actual set and setting and my ability in sitting and knowing and working with clients like this and personal experience. You don't get to write that off and say that just because I didn't go to Harvard, I don't know what I'm talking about. And when it comes to plant medicine, it's just different. If you look at these healers in Peru and Brazil and all over the world who have been born and bred into this, none of these people are doctors. We understand that it works. We don't always have the mechanisms to describe to you how it's working. We have a more spiritual way, or woo-woo, some will say, way to maybe articulate it. But that doesn't mean that we're not knowledgeable in the medicine. But Health Canada is strict as hell. They are very reluctant to give anything to its population that could potentially reframe their brains, wake them up, and show them that the system is not working for them. It's genuinely working against them.
So you've obviously have had, really great success with your integration techniques, not for just yourself, but with other, clients that you coach. So, without kind of giving away your secrets, so to speak, like what does look like a good full complete integration program, like before and after, if you can just walk us through that?
Yeah, absolutely. So every coach is very individualized. We all go to school on some level for this, right? So we do have the background. Mine was addiction and psychedelic integration. So looking at how the brain is going to adapt to certain entheogens and otherwise. So for me, I work also with heroic hearts in the United States. So I work with veterans there too, getting them ready to go with medicine and my private clients. And what I will tell you is it's not rocket science, right? Everything comes from a place of intentionality. If we can be intentional about how we move, everything else will follow into place. So I always ask for at least 3 to 4 sessions with one-on-one with a client prior to them even going to a medicine. And then the set and setting, and then a minimum of 3 on the back end. Often I end up getting people 6 to 8 sessions on the back end, depending on the dosage, what came up, what they're working through, and how much really kicked in ceremony to kind of really ground them back down into reality. Because as I said, it changes your reality, regardless of the medicine you're using. And I had a ranger buddy of mine say that to me one time as we were walking in to do ayahuasca for the very first time. He looked at me very, very, very sternly and said, once you see the mountaintop, you cannot unsee it. And that was the best analogy. It's the rose-colored glasses. Once you take them off, there's no putting them back on. And that happens in every aspect of your life, how you view, how you perceive, how you feel, how you move. Everything changes. So you have to be consciously aware of what you're actually going to do. This isn't a party drug like you're in college anymore. You use this stuff with intentionality and it'll show up for you in your life. So I do my sessions at the beginning. They're an hour each. They can include everything from journaling techniques to conversation around what they want, intention building for the medicine, breath work and giving them somatic release practices, all the way to changing their diet, right? So I'm a big believer in the sum of the 5, but I'm not just talking about your food and your people. I'm talking about what you listen to, what you see, the energy you put out. Everything has to come into play here. So I make people go off social media. We turn the news off because you should do that anyway, because it's all propaganda. We want to keep you in a state that is not just calm, but just more of a neutral, where nothing is super heightened and nothing is super low. We want to cut out things like pork. A lot of medicines don't super love pork. We want to look at your hydration. We want to cut out caffeine. We want you sleeping, because we know as long as you get sleep, everything else you can handle. And then we get you ready to go into the medicine. And more often than not, just from people getting super clean in diet and movement and the way that they are in their life and becoming intentional. That's a huge part of the piece. Like that's massive right there. People don't realize the stuff they consume on a daily basis because they wake up, they go do their thing, and the next thing you know, it's bedtime. They're not present. They're not intentional. So this pulls them into that presence even before they get to the medicine. And there is this kind of saying that goes, the medicine starts once you say yes. And that's because that's the intentionality around preparing to actually go sit with the medicine. And the more you respect it on the front end, I'm telling you, the more you will get out on the back end. But if you mess around and you go do something like ayahuasca, she's going to mess around too.
So if you have like specific intentions, like do you get your clients to like write them down, and
Yes.
do you tell them like during the journey, like, if your mind goes somewhere else, do you let it go somewhere else? You tell them like go back to your intentions and try to work through that process.
So for me, I'm a big believer that the medicine is going to show you everything you want and not what you think you want. So the intention may be one thing, and and a lot of people will come with a bunch of intentions. And then it's just basically about breaking down what is the theme of all of those. And then how do we come up with one really solid, like, this is what I'm asking for. And then I pick one word. So if you write out the intention and then we go, okay, here's your key word. Here's your word to really ground you back down if you feel like you're floating away. Because if it's your first time, can be overwhelming on the system. You're taking a foreign substance. Your body starts to freak out and panic a little. It's like, what are you doing to me? And so we teach them breathwork techniques so that when they feel like they're floating and they can't catch their breath, they say their word and they just go back into the breath, go back into the rhythm, and it grounds them down. We don't fight the medicine. You don't try to direct the medicine. This is your intention going in. This is what you ask of it. And then it will give you what it thinks that interprets it to be. And then almost every time you may say, oh, that was my intention. And then like you'll come out and then like a week later, you'll be like, boom. Oh yeah, that's why. Okay. It actually was my intention. It just showed up this way.
And the intentions that a lot of people use, like it seems like you mentioned addictions earlier. So is that one of the big things that people want to get rid of? And do a lot of people just say, listen, like, I just want to focus on one thing. Like, I got to get rid of this opioid habit, or I got to get rid of my smoking habit or my alcohol habit? And like, which ones or which substances, like in particular, have you found that people have been able to get off with psilocybin?
So I actually have never had a client who has wanted to use psilocybin to get off of a substance. Now, if we're talking about ibogaine, we're talking about something different. And that's normally alcohol or opioids, because ibogaine functions very differently. And
I think with tobacco as well with ibogaine.
Yeah, anything addictive. Anything addictive, ibogaine is like, wow. If we could just literally go down to the east side of Vancouver and give people, ibogaine, that east side would clear up so fast your head would spin. We could actually fix the problem than give people heroin. So anyway, I digress. When it comes to things, the clients that I've had, the majority of the time, it's not about kicking a habit. For them, it's about a trauma, a childhood thing, I don't feel like I'm doing great things in my life. I feel very stuck. I feel very lost. I feel a lack of purpose or identity. I'm struggling to try to know who I am and what I want to do with my life. And I feel like this could help. Or depressive states are kicking off in a big way. And they've heard of ketamine. And then I've had a conversation with them and they go, I don't want to do that. And then I go, so why not psilocybin? And they go, yeah, that seems more right. And that's the thing you have to remember, right? Not every medicine is right for everything. That's why things like ketamine they're legal. So it's being prescribed for the blanket. Whereas some of these things are heart openers. They're your MDMA, your psilocybin, your ayahuasca. Whereas ketamine, again, is a dissociative. It has its properties for sure. Not saying it doesn't have its use cases, but for the clientele that I've been working with now for quite some time, it's almost never the right answer. They do it for a couple of weeks and come back and go, yeah, you were right. Let's go try psilocybin. And then we go, well, you need an X amount of period of time to give your brain a break and integrate that. Because that's what I do see. I see people jumping from one thing to the next because they're not integrating and they don't have somebody to guide them to show them, well, actually, you've done the work. Now it's how we implement it into your life now.
So one thing I want to chat with you about as well is I know you chatted this with Candace recently, and it was, basically about men and struggling with going to therapy and these kinds of things. So, you're a veteran, veteran obviously is more of a, male dominated profession overall. You must know, lots of males who struggle with mental health, PTSD, all this kind of stuff. Do you feel like there's still a stigma within the community for, veterans coming out and saying that they have PTSD? Is that still seen as like weak? And, how has that changed if it has recently?
Yeah, I mean, I do. Again, the majority of my clients are men, and it's not because I choose for that. It's just the area I do my nonprofit work in is definitely male dominated because it's the veteran space. There are females. I've had a bunch of female clients. They've been fantastic. Definitely more A-type females that join. So they end up being more similar to me, which is an easy way to work because I know what makes that tick. But in terms of men, I do see still a bit of a stigma. And it's not because I would say the military is putting that stigma on them. I think consciously we're all aware that bad things happen at war. And we are all aware now that you see the stuff, it's going to have an effect. And it's just whether or not it starts to show up then or it shows up later in different parts of your life, whether that's just gut health in general, right? So if you're looking at things like PTSD or you're looking at traumatic brain injury, 11 of the 13 symptoms overlap. So they very often go misdiagnosed. My traumatic brain injury went undiagnosed for a decade because of it. And so you'll see things like gut health stuff start to kick off, or even diabetic symptoms because of the TBI, right? Their brain is just starting to go into overload. Or you'll see things like substance abuse will kick on, and it's whether they're ready to admit it or not. And then the other thing is, on the flip side of the coin is, depending on where you serve, the government is either accepting of that or they're not. So people, it's less about the stigma and more about, do I want to keep my career or do I want to have to go become a civilian and restart? So some militaries are good with it, whereas like the Canadian Armed Forces right now is looking at hiring like neurodivergent people and people with past trauma. And I look at that as somebody and go, you kicked me out for that. So it's kind of insane to see the way that they're looking at it. But I think the stigma exists, but maybe not in the way that it used to exist. We're all consciously aware of it now. It's just, do you want to be the person that loses the job or keeps the job? And if you can keep the job, can you do treatment in the meantime? And a lot of times people are able to skate around the system and go get help on their own so that it doesn't show up on, say, their DD-214 in America or otherwise. So it's just very dependent. But I think society more is causing not the stigma, but especially towards the male side of things right now. I don't know if you've caught on to the batshit craziness that has happened since Trump became president, but we have this insane feminist movement. And I say we because, well, I don't know why. I say it because chromosome-wise, I am a female, but I want nothing to do with any of the batshit crazy females that are existing, shaving their head right now. Men are being attacked on at a pace right now that no wonder the suicide rates are what they are. When you have a society that tells it that you're not worthy, you should not be here, we do not need you, get the fuck out and die. Of course, men are going to feel that. Of course, they're not going to cry in front of their females. Of course, they're going to feel beaten down and weak. Why wouldn't you if you have a whole side of the world saying you do not need to exist, we can do this without you? I mean, we don't appreciate our husbands. We don't appreciate the men in our lives. And I know it's a blanket statement, but I'm telling you, it just based on the way the world looks right now, the only thing we really appreciate men for is going to war. And even then we have, it's a whole different conversation around it. So I think it's a whole problem. It's not just a PTS in the military, a stigma. I think it's societally, we have told men they are not worthy of living. We have told men that they shouldn't have the right to be masculine. We tell them they're toxic and disgusting if they open doors for women, if they carry bags for women, or if they tell women, you know what, if you just want to have children and stay home, I got you. I'll look after this. You look after this. So I think it's a compilation of all the things.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like it's, specific to the military at all. Like it seems like,
No.
Men, whether they're, in the military, not in the military, they still sort of, face this stigma, I guess, in some ways. And they, are afraid still of seeking help. And so when people do come to you for help, like, is it that they feel that like, you're a veteran, you understand me a little bit more, and because of that, like I feel comfortable with you? Like, what is it about Kelsi that makes men like feel comfortable coming to them and asking for help?
Because a lot of times people say that I'm a tiny man. I have a different approach, right? So like, obviously I'm wearing a hoodie right now and a toque, and it's 6:30 in the morning, so bear with me. But I am considered a more masculine female. I'm working on that. I'm working on the feminine side of things, of not needing to be that outwardly masculine person all of the time. But that again comes from upbringing, that comes from military experience, that comes from the female feminine side was maybe, I don't say dangerous, but on the front lines with a bunch of other men was not necessarily the time for me to be like, oh my God, I don't love how dirty everything is. Like it exists. She's in there. You know, if like you said, if you watch anything I did with Jordan or Lex or anybody else, I dress like a woman. I act like a woman. I am a woman. But when it comes to working with men, there is a silent understanding I find. I don't know if it's because they've seen that I have a background in service and I've done real things in my deployment time. I've seen real things. I've had real experiences. Or if it's because, and I get this a lot, some of the men I work with have had very negative experiences with women. And they have, and not I'm saying therapist or anything, I'm saying maybe a bad breakup. Maybe they just never really got with a woman, or they did, and that woman really hurt them and it scarred the hell out of them. Maybe their mom was just a terrible person and showed no empathy. So for me, a lot of times I meet people where they're at really well. I think that's one of the things I've been trying, like, not bragging, but I try really hard. Like that is an intent of mine every day. Meet people where they're at, whether I feel that way or not, and hold that space. So I think I can meet them in a very masculine space if it's needed, but I can soften up and hold that like motherly energy and say, okay, like that's okay. It's fine. I know that you're pushing and I can see it. And I know that you're angry. That's cool. But I'm going to respond a little differently than what you're used to. And then it almost reframes what it can be like to work with a woman or to be around another female. Because to be honest, some of these men, they need a shit kicking. They need to be kicked in the teeth a little bit and told, well, no, we're not doing that. You want to have this life. You want to do these things. This is the way it's got to go. You don't like it, too bad. That works. And then you also have the man who is very much struggling and is like, I don't feel like I can be this open with a man because I will feel judged. But because you're a woman, I can kind of go a little deeper into that. I'm really, really in it right now, and I don't know how I'm going to get out. Can you please help me? So I think there's a duality there.
Yeah, it's interesting though. You said that, like, you know, men will tell you that if they chat with another man, they feel judged. You know, that when they chat with you, you know, they don't feel judged. But what about, do you think that some men don't, they think that other women believe that if they go see a therapist or get treatment, that they're kind of like a pussy sort of thing?
Oh,
and
yeah.
That's the reason why they don't do it.
Yeah.
And do you think that other females, though, don't believe that? Like other females see men as like, okay, you know, you're struggling a little bit, you're going to get some therapy. That's totally cool. I don't see this as like abnormal at all. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
I think there's a subset of women who see it as the opposite of what the man thinks, right? They have this perception because we grow up and we're told that if a man goes and does this or cries, they're weak. So, but I think there's a massive group, and I know for a fact, I mean, I'll be honest, the women I surround myself with, if their husband cries or their husband's in it, they see that as strength and courage and bravery. And it's like, oh my God, you showed me the depths of you. You get more of the depths of me. When you meet me where you're at, I meet you where you're at. But let's be honest, if you've been on TikTok, you've been on social media, maybe you've been pretty much anywhere in the globe right now, there is this perception that is given, whether it's reality or not, that if you're a man and you cry and you do said thing, you're weak. And so men clam up. Like I had this conversation with Ryan Mickler. Him and I, it's funny, we're friends, but we definitely like, he's a little more like, you know, how do I say this? The whole episode was about this. It was like male vulnerability. I think personally, and the people I surround myself with who are very secure women, who are very secure in themselves, who have dealt with their childhood trauma, who understand their triggers and their shit, those women go, that's amazing. I want more of that. If you're having a hard time, say it. I don't want you to cry 24/7 because then that's a symptom and a sign of something worse we should treat. But you're in it. Let's be in it. I'll be in it with you. Whereas a lot of the women now is like, well, if he cries, he's weak, he's pathetic. I want a real man. It's like, well, no, but a real man can feel all of the emotions from like, I can and will kill for you to, oh my God, you just had a baby, I'm weeping, or oh my God, my friend just died and I am distraught and I am destroyed and I don't know how to move forward because my heart is so broken. Like, a human that can feel all of the emotions is the most attractive human to me, is the most courageous and brave human to me, because it means that you're willing to do what makes you uncomfortable. Because when you get uncomfortable, that's where your growth is going to lie. That's why emotional intelligence is the most, in my personal opinion, one of the most attractive sets that a man can have, because it tells me that you're willing to do the thing that you don't want to do because you know it's the right thing, not the comfortable thing.
Yeah, well, I'm really, really happy that you said that. And I think a lot of, men really needed to hear that. And I think it too brings me back to like thinking about connection, because
Yeah.
that's what a lot of people are looking for in their relationship. And that's what a lot of people struggle with. They're looking for a connection. And I think that if someone's not able to be themselves, if they're not able to, express themselves fully, then they're not going to be able to connect. And I think that if you, work on that, the connection can really, really build, and, you can have a much, much better relationship overall. And you seem to be nodding about this. So, what are your kind of thoughts on connection? Does that come up sometimes and with some of your clients?
Oh yeah. I mean, my God, it came up in my own marriage. Like that's such a universal feeling, when you are able to be, and I hate this word because it's been so co-opted and grossed out on social media, but when you can be actually authentic. And I'm not talking about like the social media version. I mean, like the today sucks. I want to punch a hole in the wall. Everything is falling around me. I feel like I'm going to have a panic attack, but you can show that side to your partner, whether you're the male or the female. And it's met with, all right. And this is the best way I always recommend people to do it too. If you're going to do it to your wife or to your spouse, is this. They're going to dump on you. They're going to say everything. I want you to go, okay, do you need me to listen? Or do we need a solution? Because the first thing that we normally do is become action oriented, right? And for me, at least, action oriented.
That's one of the best things I've ever heard on this podcast is what you just said. Like,
yeah.
No, like, because sometimes people do, like, they will go right into the solution and they think that that's helping. But a lot of times someone just wants the other person to listen,
Yeah.
So anyways, Go ahead. I didn't want to.
No, it's okay. No, it's okay. The reason I say that is because I learned that in my own marriage, and I'm now divorced. So I learned that I'm an action-oriented person, and I learned from my mistakes. So one of the things I learned, this is how I do what I do. I'm not a doctor. I go through life making all of the wrong moves and go, oh, here's how we don't do it again. And I teach it that way. So I became very action-oriented when there was a medical thing happening. And I got to tell you, like, it was a downfall because I was never, ever, I thought I was doing the right thing. So when somebody says to you and it's kind of giving you all this, of course you want to fix the problem because you love the person. You don't want to see them suffer. So let's fix the problem. But most of the time, what people don't realize is they just need it to be heard. Because as Dr. John Deloney says, grief demands a witness. It doesn't need a solution all of the time, right? It just needs space. It needs to be held. And it needs to know that no matter what's said there, you're not going anywhere. So that would be my biggest piece is if we could just look at people and like go, okay, connection is here. I'm giving you it all. I'm very vulnerable. This is so uncomfortable. I can't believe I'm saying these things out loud, but I've said them. And then they look at you and go, okay, do you need help? Or would you just need me to listen? If you can meet somebody there, I'm telling you right now, connection just from that right there will shift so dramatically because what it'll tell the person is you're actively listening, you're being present in the moment with me, and you're also being intentional about your words. You're not just saying, oh, that sucks, I'm sorry. Oh, really? Let's go fix the problem. You're sitting with it for a second and going, wow, that must be really hard. And what you must have said must have really been difficult to actually say into real life. How do you want me to hold this for you? And it's putting that kind of like invisible arm around you and going, okay, what do you want to do now? And it's giving you the chance to kind of get it out and then reframe it yourself and ask yourself, actually, what do I want? Because most of the time we'll say it. We don't know what we're looking for on the back end. We just need to say it. We just need to get off our chest and say it. But most of the time, if we can just say it, then we go, okay, what do you need? Oh, right. What do I need? You know what? I don't actually need anything. I just needed to say it. That's it.
Yeah. And I can see that too being difficult with people who have PTSD because they're hypervigilant, right? Like that's one of the, main symptoms or hallmarks of PTSD is being hypervigilant. And if people don't know what hypervigilance means, it means like just being always on edge. I mean, when it gets to a really bad point of view or to a really bad state, people can be, looking out their window, that kind of thing.
Oh, yeah.
I've been out with, veterans at restaurants and, they can't seat or have it take a seat with their back is not against the wall, which it's near like that. And again, that's not even that bad of like a thing overall, actually.
It's mild.
Sometimes I'm like, that's actually kind of smart in some ways,
Yeah.
But, if you have hypervigilance, if you have, anxiety, it's going to be hard for you to sometimes just just sit, because when something happens, what you want to do is react right away. Yeah. So if someone is, struggling with that, how do you try to teach them that through your practice?
Breath.
We
learn how to breathe, because the majority of people walking around, even if you don't have PTSD or any sort of ailment or issue, they breathe like this. Like they don't, literally, I have sat there with people and just heard them just go, I'm like, oh, we're not breathing. Okay, cool. So no wonder your nervous system is in fight or flight. No wonder you feel heightened. And like, I get it. Like right now, my shoulders are glued to my ears. That's why I keep stretching. Like I know where my nervous system is at this week. It ain't good, but I'm conscious of it. So I'll intentionally breathe differently today. And all that means is teaching them a technique that as they go throughout the day, they can anchor themselves back into. And it's about learning your body, right? Most people, like I said, are just running. They're not even consciously aware. They'll go, oh my God, I got in the car and I was at work and I don't even know how I got there. Well, damn, maybe when we get in the car, the first thing we do is we're going to take 6 to 7 nasal mouth breaths. We're going to go 4 in and we're going to do 6 out. And then we're going to drive. Or so if you...
4 in through your nose, 6 out through your mouth?
Yes.
Okay.
It'll bring you right down. If you do over 5 rounds of it normally, if somebody's really in it, one of the fastest ways is to physiological sigh. That one I find it gets you more oxygen faster. And because they're breathing and they're not getting enough oxygen, it's going to give them that fresh hit where their body will just kind of naturally go, okay. And you do a few rounds of it. And it's really simple. It's just that inhale like this, quick snap at the end, and then just repeat that cycle. I have all my athletes do it when they're on the field in between plays, because what it's doing is it's helping open up your lungs. And then that last hit is going to open up the tiny little sacs in the lungs and go and give you an even bigger one. And then when you exhale, it's going to bring you down. And so that's like the quickest. I do that when I'm driving. People have road rage. I just have impatient tendencies because
Me too. And in London, Ontario, for whatever reason, it's just construction 24/7.
You guys never stop building.
Yeah, it's wild. It's wild how much like construction we have. So I feel you on the road rage.
Right. So if you can just breathe differently, you can actually handle things like road rage. And the other thing in terms of road rage, one of my fun little things I tell people to do is I just want you to put yourself in the shoes. What if that person in front of you is just learning to drive for the first time? What if that's your kid that just got their license? Would you want the other person screaming at them? No. Put yourself in somebody else's shoes for a second. They may just be distracted driving. Sure, that's fine. That happens. That's everywhere. But just try to be mindful. And I think of it this way. What if that was my buddy who just got home from overseas and not used to driving? Like I'll give you a very quick example of that. I was in San Diego and a friend of ours after a wedding just got home from a deployment and he drove us back to the hotel. We drove into oncoming traffic.
Oh God.
And then had to aggressively deviate and spin down another road and the cops lit us up. Okay. And that wasn't because he was a bad driver. It was because he had been overseas driving on one side of the road or wherever he wanted for so long that he had forgot that he was now in San Diego. And fortunately, he's a very good defensive driver. So we didn't hit anybody. Nothing bad happened. And the area we were in was Coronado. So the cops understand there's a lot of people turning and special operators coming back. So it was met with, it's all good. Just slow down a little. It's no worries. We understand. But that's not always the case, right? So it's about being present in our bodies. We move through life just existing. That's just how the world has designed us. Dopamine, screens, quick. We just got to slow it down a little. And I understand that's hard, but we all have busy schedules. What we don't have time for is disassociating from our bodies and then waking up at work and going, how did I get here? That's just not acceptable behavior anymore.
So I'm happy we're really talking about the breath work because I had a guy, Dr. Aboud Bakri, on the podcast recently. And like, he was saying like, there's really nothing that can, switch your system from, sympathetic to parasympathetic. So, going from, being very, very excitable to feeling a little bit calm, switching from sympathetic to parasympathetic, then with breath work, and we don't really do it very often. So are there any in addition to the protocol that you just mentioned, like when someone's kind of like in it, like do you have people do things like in the morning, in the afternoon, like, and again, without giving away your secrets,
okay.
Like what are your sort of protocols that you like to put people through? And sorry, just one more question. And do you measure it? Like, do you use heart rate variability or anything like that to see if there's improvements, or do you just kind of ask your clients to more or less just, use their own body?
We do a scale at the beginning of the session where I go, how are you feeling today? 1 to 10. Where are you at? Okay. We start there. So then I get a little bit of a baseline based on their judgment of their bodies. Because a lot of times if my clients are virtual, I have people all over the world, so I can't always be in person with them. Right. If I'm in person with the client, it's very visually obvious. You can feel the energy off them shifts. So I start with 1 to 10, where are we at? And then I do a breath reset. So one of the best breath resets I learned that I love is, so it's 30 breaths in your mouth like this. Really inhaling as far as you can, filling up the lungs. Sometimes tapping up here will just kind of tell your body, okay, expand up here. And then you do 30 breaths of that. After that, you do a breath hold at the top as long as you can. And that is just your intention for the day. What are you focusing on there? And you hold there. Then you exhale out your mouth. Then you start your nasal to mouth breathing. So, and that's 30 rounds of that. And so that kind of gives you this all the way up and then all the way down. So it's kind of working the lungs, telling the body to wake up, and then coming back down into that parasympathetic and bringing yourself and grounding yourself in with that intention. I do that in the morning. I do it in the afternoon before bed, and just kind of get ready for the day, get rid of the day. And then throughout the day, I use the physiological sighing, or if I'm really in it, I will sit down and I'll do the 4 to 6, and I'll do longer rounds of it. But then I'm a somatic practitioner. So I do the long sessions where, people kind of see people screaming and losing their shit on the ground, that energy work. I do that work in person with people. And that's very much hands-on work as well. So it's manipulating the energy as we do it. So I love doing in-person sessions. My favorite is the person or the athlete who's like, yeah, whatever, this is going to be whatever. And I'm like, okay, ready? And then we get them going, and about halfway through, they're either yelling or screaming or bawling their eyes out. And afterwards they go, oh my God, what was that? And it's like, I told you, you just got to be willing. Most people are just unwilling. And I think that's the biggest piece, right? Once, a friend of mine who's a coach, George, he said this once to me, and it hit me so damn hard. It slapped me in the face, and it's like, awareness is the finish line, right? If you can make somebody aware of their behavior, they now have the option and the choice. Do I change said behavior? Do I keep going the way I'm going? And that's like that for everything in our life. If you know you're making shitty decisions, are you aware of it? Or are you just subconsciously doing it? Are you reacting rather than being present? And that all comes back to the breath. But the other thing I just wanted to say, in terms of the parasympathetic nervous system, there is another technique, 2 of them that I learned in brain treatment at Resiliency that is really beneficial. And it's to just vibrate the vagus. And so one of them is humming or singing really loudly. So, when you sing in a car, you've been driving for like an hour and you've just been belting out crazy music, no one can hear you. And afterwards you kind of go, that felt good. That was nice. That's not just an energetic release, but it's because you're vibrating your vagus nerve. Right? And so when you vibrate that's actually going to bring you down. Humming loudly also works for that. So if you're really in it, I ask people to hum. If you can't hum or you can't make noise, gargle water. Anything that will vibrate this will help you significantly.
Very cool. And so how long do people need to hum or people need to gargle in order to get like benefits?
I feel like it is personal, and it depends where your nervous system is at. For me, I can get in the car for 15 minutes and just sing my ass off to like anything, and I'm good. I'm like, oh.
Are you a Taylor Swift fan?
I'd rather punch myself in the face.
Okay. I just need to ask you that.
No, I'm more of like a, like the Cranberries or like Key Glock or like
Key Glock.
Wayne.
I love Key Glock. I can't believe you just said his name. No one else knows who he is. He's
Key
wicked.
Glock is one of, if I gotta I want that man on my show more than I'd like to admit, or like Connor Price. He doesn't swear.
This is so weird. Like, I gotta show you. I'm gonna send you my playlist right now. It's so.
Do you
so
have
wild.
send?
Like,
you have my number, don't you?
It's absolutely wild. Yeah, I think I do. But
yeah.
But these are sort of like relatively like obscure-ish people. You know what I mean?
I think Connor's exploding. Connor's definitely getting there.
I think he's getting bigger too, and he's got one guy, good. Nick C. I think that comes on with him a lot. He's pretty good too. So.
Yeah, Connor. He is like, I'm one person away from him, and I want him on the show more than I can. And then same with Key Glock. I love Key Glock. People will laugh at me and they're like, Kelsi, you're white. And I'm like, yeah, but here's the thing. I'm white.
A white person from Newfoundland. I get it.
But wait, you put on gang shit, no lame shit, and I'm gonna start popping real quick. Like, I got no problem with like knowing what I love, but I'll get in the car, like that's my thing. And as long as no one's with me, I will go mental because it does make me feel better. I am aware of that trick. And I learned that when I was doing brain treatment. We're not taught that as a coping mechanism in the military or in medical school or in anything for that matter. These are all little things you learn after an injury that you're like, oh my God, that's a tool I can use. Also, lastly, there is this thing called a stem pen. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. It's like you use them in like acupuncture or things like that. And basically it like zaps and it has different settings and you can put it on different nerves to kind of get it to start to fire. But when you take that on like a setting 2 or 3, you can get them on Amazon. If you just type in stem acupuncture pen, and they're like $10 on Amazon, and you put, bear with me, that thing on your tongue. And you set it on like a setting 2. It'll just make your tongue jump a little. That's all really you're looking for. And leave it there for like a minute or 2 until you basically start to salivate. That'll also bring your nervous system down too.
Interesting. That's a pretty cool trick. And also, sounds like it's pretty cheap too.
Super cheap. And I keep it with me I keep it in my bag. So if I'm on a plane and I can't hum, I can't gargle, and I'm really just, for whatever reason, lack of sleep or whatever, my body is just overwhelmed, I'll hit myself with that a few times in a row and just my whole body will go, okay, hi, we're back. Welcome.
Nice. Well, so now we have a few things, because that's something that's kind of comes up is like, through the breath work, it's like, yeah, but what can I use like on the spot, So there's a few things that we got, the physiological side. I mean, you don't even need any equipment for that. But if you're home, you can use the gargle, and then you can also use the stick that you just said. And then the humming, maybe you can't hum in the middle of a meeting or something, but you certainly can if you're, on the road in your car, right? And something happens.
Absolutely.
I know I only got you there for another 5 minutes or so,
No
Kelsi.
worries.
Is there anything else that you wanted to chat about today that we kind of left off, or?
Oh man, I feel like you and I, there's honestly a million things. I'd love to do it again. I'd love to have you back on mine again and just kind of go through I'm a little more nihilistic on my show when it comes to where we're at, when it comes to our healthcare system. So we'll keep it positive today. But the other thing I would just say is like, for people that are, whether this is in Canada or otherwise, like, I just want you to remember that if the first thing your doctor says to you when you meet with them is a pill, I want you to understand that's a drug dealer. I want you to understand that they need to be asking you, and you need to be pushing them around your sleep, around your movement, around your diet, around those things before you decide to take medication. I am a person that was on, 11 different drugs for over a decade. They have massive repercussions. They have a place in medicine when it comes to triaging someone, especially in a mental health state. But I just want people to be aware that there are just ungodly amount of tools that if you're willing to do the work, those tools will work for you. They're not for everyone. They're not for everything. But I would just encourage people, before you start getting on a round of SSRIs, before you get on a round of any sort of psychoactive, anything that's going to change the makeup of your brain, be mindful that there probably is a way for you to handle anxiety, because anxiety is just an alarm bell going off. Let's not numb it. Let's stop numbing it. Let's stop putting our 12-year-olds on birth control. Let's stop doing these things that we know are going to erode their gut health and cause longer mental health implications, and actually talk about what's going on and look at the other modalities that we have that can heal. Grounding is a huge one for inflammation and for stress relief.
How
Movement.
do you use grounding with your
Stand in the grass, homie.
Yeah.
Put your feet in the dirt. Go stand in the ocean. Go stand anywhere that is connected to the earth. That has serious, serious benefits. Go get grounding sheets for your bed. Literally, you plug them into the wall. They will show we have scans to show the inflammation changes in bodies when you're grounding more. When you do that, your inflammation goes down. Your brain works better. You think better. You move better. You act better. So
I sleep on one every night.
So do I. So That's what I'm saying is, before we reach for the pill, let's look at our diet. Let's look at our sleep. Let's look at our movement. Let's look at all the places that are hard to look at. But if you do that earlier, you're going to have a much easier life on the back end. It'll just be more complicated here. And then most importantly, man, drink some damn water. We are a very dehydrated society, and our brains do not function well without water and an electrolyte. And that is the one thing I'm seeing so much with my clients is they don't drink electrolytes, and then they think that, well, I drank enough water, I should be fine. Get an electrolyte. I do not work with an electrolyte company, so I can't say like, go use so-and-so. But I personally, myself, I like salt, so I use Element, and it works really, really well.
That's what I used to. I have 2 packs of it a day.
Yeah. And it's expensive. I understand that, but it is so much better looking after yourself now instead of having to take time off work because I burnt myself out on both ends. We don't have to do this hustle culture. I work all day, every day, but there is still time in between where you can take breaks, and you should. And that's where you go and you breathe and you stand in the grass, and you can do those at the same time. And that takes you 10 minutes. So we have 10 minutes in 24-hour period. You just have to be willing to say to yourself, I am worthy of looking after myself so that I can fill my cup, so that I can heal myself, so that I don't bleed on everyone else around me. And then again, if you need help, you can reach out. I take clients on and off. I work with people all over the place, and I'm happy to work with anyone who wants to work. I am a person of accountability. So if you're serious about getting yourself together and you're not sure how to start, that's kind of where my magic is. So you can reach out to me pretty much anywhere, social media. My website's kelsisheren.com. You can reach out on Instagram. It's just, if you can find me on Instagram, I'm quite banned. It's just Kelsi_Sheren. You got to spell that all the way out. And if you can't get me there, you can go to the Brass and Unity website. Somebody will get in contact. There's a million ways. But most importantly, Mike, is just what you're doing works for people. What you're doing helps people see the other side of things. And I'm not going to lie, the more ruthless you get on Twitter, the more here for you I am. So please keep doing what you're doing.
Well, I really appreciate you saying that. I really appreciate your support. You've been a great friend through, the last couple of years. And so you kind of, did tell people a little bit where they can find you, but definitely check out, Kelsi on all her channels, and you are taking new clients still. Is that correct?
Yeah, I am.
All right,
yeah.
Awesome. So it's kelsisheren.com. Go there and learn more about her. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening. And as always, I'll be back with another episode soon.